All right, hello. This is Simplicity, recording a video for Tazwell of Foof's server on how I do bones type animation in Krita. And I say that with huge air quotes because it's not the same as something like ToonBoom or OpenToonz or any of those. I will also apologize in advance for audio quality and for general disorganization because I don't often do this. So starting out, how do you just like get into animation mode in Krita? The easiest way, go to Window, go to Workspace, Animation. And that will open up this animation docker at the bottom. You can do a similar thing using settings with these dockers here. But, the Window Workspace animation is the easiest. Next up is, I have notes for myself, is the timeline and curves menu. So the timeline is mostly for like the frame by frame type animation. So I'm going to take the tail here. And so each one of these light blue frames in the menu is a different frame of animation. It's its own custom drawn independent layer. That's not going to be as useful if you're doing bones-based animation. With bones, we're going to take the example of like just the hair front here. I know that it doesn't look like it's actually selecting that, but it is, I promise. This only has a single frame, and that frame continues throughout the entire thing. The thing that actually affects it is this transform layer. And the transform layer, you can add a new one. Going to take and remove this one for just a moment. You select the group that the layers are part of. You then come down here, click on the little arrow next to the plus, add transform mask, and that will add a transform layer or a transform mask that is attached to the group. If you attach it to an individual layer, I think it appears, but it doesn't like come up with what it's supposed to. I'm going to step back so that I get all my animations back. And that's where we get into animation curves. Animation curves are used for at least the transform mask. I don't know how it affects these other ones. I haven't played with them. But as you can see, like as I click through this, keep in mind that this is affecting the entire head. The red is the position in X, the green is the position in Y, and then there's down here, I think this is position Z, so no, that doesn't look right. I think that's something else, whatever. Doesn't matter. What matters is that like as I click through it, you can see that things move, and it's all based on where these individual things are. Now this is a very like complex animation that has a lot of stuff moving. As worth saying, I'm pretty sure that just like within each of these, you can also have. No, am I stupid? I think I might be stupid. I was about to say, I think you can have like animations inside of animations, but I think I might just be. No, okay. So you can have transforms inside of transforms. So like the eyes here are moving separately compared to the head, which is also moving. Or they're moving relative to the head, I should say. That's something that you'll just have to get used to. A bit of information on navigating this interface because it's not very intuitive. If you left click on the scale here, if you pull it down, it'll compress the scale. If you pull it up, it'll expand the scale. It goes based on like the lowest point on the scale. You can do the same thing by left clicking on this icon, this up and down arrow up here. It's a little bit slower with this one. The one next to it that's a horizontal arrow, that is like the number of frames that you can see on your screen. Good for if you like want to see more or less at once. And then these two, I'm not quite sure what they do separately, but they'll basically just put everything on your screen. Or like fit the animation or fit the animation curve thing here so that all of the possible values that are in use are on your screen. Let's see. What else do we have? Checking my notes. If you want to select like an entire column of values, you can double click on them. If you click once, it'll select just one. If you double click, it'll select all of them. Adding a keyframe, let's say that I want to add something on frame 7 here. You just click here, this little plus button, pretty straightforward. By default, it will kind of go directly to the next setting, this, what is this? Linear interpolation. You can see that here I'm like not trying to do any sort of graceful stuff. Like it just maintains the same sort of frame for a moment. If you want to do that, you just select all of the individual nodes that you want, or select them by group. Like, so let's say that I just want the green one, the green line here. Let me expand that out a bit. I just want this green line here to stay flat, but I want the red one to continue moving. I would select where it starts and then select this button here, hold constant value. Or if I want to do all of them at once, so let me undo that so that it's back where it was. If I double click so that I'm selecting everything, straightforward. There's also a curved option, which is more useful for like using these, I think. It's a little weird. I am not the best at it. All right, you can like pull this out and it'll do that. Anyway, like I said, I'm not very good at explaining this. So how do you actually like easily manipulate these? Because trying to move these individually, if I go back to this, you can see I can move this like red thing all the way up to the point that it's like crazy higher than everything else. And well, I wasn't on the same frame there. But let's say that I was on the same frame. Whoops. What did I do there? Whoops. Fun. But let's say, now I'm on the correct frame. Oh, did they fix that? Okay. There used to be an issue where if you like clicked these and moved them around, it wouldn't actually update and you would have to like change frames back and forth in order to see it. I guess they fixed that. But rather than doing it this way, you're probably going to want to like actually see what you're doing. So if you use the transform tool, which is this like sort of painting frame-esque icon on your toolbar, you can click on it, you can spin it around, and you can see down here it is adjusting as needed. Let me fit this to the curve again. I can move it around, blah, blah, blah. And it'll adjust here as needed. And that helps a lot for like being able to visually see what's going on. Something that is super duper important to keep in mind, and something that I did not think of when I was doing this. If I go back to frame 0, this is like the starting point for most of these, quote, bones. And the bones, I should have said, are just like groups of layers. If I take, and I'm going to take my little line tool here, and I'm just going to draw a line straight down the center. Oh, I have to actually go to a layer that has something on it. If I just draw a line straight down the center here, of course it appears there. And as I go through the frames, it'll move around. But let's say that I wasn't on that frame. Let's say that I was on like frame 7, which is here. And I'm going to draw another line straight down the middle. You can see, even before I put it down, it's at this angle. And what happens is when you're actually painting, it's painting based on not having the transform layer active. So if I go back to frame 0, you can see that's where it is. Like there is something there. And of course, because of the way I have my setup, it's like not actually copying that, or it's making a new frame for that, but whatever, you can still see that like that's where it is. Um, so if I go back to frame 7 and I turn off the transform layer, you can see that's where it lines up, straight down the center. My point here is when you're actually drawing your bones, don't do what I did where I set everything up to like be the first frame of animation and draw the first frame of animation and animate that. It will not work well for you. What I would recommend doing is, I'm going to take some of these off, is what I did for the body here. Once I realized what I was doing, and I put the entire body sort of like centered. And that way, once I turn the transform layer on, like it was much easier to make edits if I needed to, because I could turn it off and it was like nicely centered. If I wanted to use like the center line mirror thing, um, I could do that. That has a animation override on it, or a transparency override on it. So probably should have used like this layer. Yeah. But if you want to like use those kinds of features, it's a lot easier to do it if everything's centered. So that's your little tidbit, is put all your stuff in the center at the maximum size you want it, and then apply the transform mask. So that's like a more complex animation. And this one's just a lot of like trying to get everything in the right place. Lol, that's still there. This is a different animation that's a lot simpler and is using like the curved interpolation. So like here to here, like I'm not individually doing the frames, I'm having it like curve over time. So it can just like figure out where it needs to go, and I can make this steeper if I need to. This is where you're using like the curve thing, and then it adds this black dot, and you can make it steeper or less steep or whatever you need it to be. Yeah, so that's the basics of that. So now I'm going to do a proper demonstration. How long have I been recording? It doesn't actually say. Amazing. Cool. So I'm going to make a new thing. This is just like a 512 by 512 thing. I'm going to make a circle here. Like I said, this is going to be super duper basic. And I'm going to put the circle inside of a group. And on the group, I'm going to add a transform mask. And then I'm going to just stay with, you know what, let's make that sphere a different color. Or that circle a different color. We're going to make it, let's make it something darker that's easier to see. And then just for the sake of, adding something to it so that we can see like rotation and stuff, I'm going to add this stripe. Back to, and by the way, when it comes to like what you can animate with this, you can do anything that is available on the basic transform tool. So over here, like in your tool options, you have like this perspective tool, you have the warp tool. You can't use those. You can only use like the first like free movement one. So that's like rotate, that's resize, that's move, and that's shear. So I have my layer here. I have my transform mask. I'm on the animation curves window here. I'm going to click on add, add keyframe. And I'm going to say, okay, we're going to have this go for, let's say 6 frames. And we're going to go for, it's like another 6 frames, another 6 frames, another 6 frames. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that on frame 6, it's going to go up, and it's also going to rotate 360-ish. It'll then return to its center point. From there, it will squish downward. Sorry, I'm just being dumb. And yeah. And is there anything else I want to do? Oh, I want to adjust the number of frames. I'll come over here and I will set this to 23 because our last frame is 24 and I want it to like loop nicely. If I set it to 24, it'll do a weird pause. And let's just go with like 5 FPS so that we can see what it's doing very nicely. So it should like rotate as it goes up, rotate as it comes back down, and then it'll just squish flat. So rotate up, rotate down, squish flat. And let's say that, you know, when I squish flat, I also want it to shear. So do that. Up, rotate, down. Sometimes it'll glitch out a little bit, but it's whatever. You'll figure out what you need to do as you get used to it. But that's the basic idea is, you know, make a group with all of your quote bones or of your quote bone, add this transform layer, add a keyframe, use the transform tool. And just to play around with this a little bit more, let's say that I want to do this, and I do like, you know, I'll make it so that as it comes down here, I'm going to make this a curve. I'm going to say, I select the actual individual thing, maybe? No, it's going to select the blue. Krita is not the most intuitive tool for this, as you can see. Oh yeah, I forgot. It actually has 2 of these, one in each direction. Yeah. But I can like do that, and now it'll do like a smoother sort of animation, I guess. Whatever the case. But yeah, that's your guide. If you have questions, please let me know.